Okay, so we are now at the very end of Operation Zero Tolerance. Like, these next three issues are really what wraps up the entire event for us. And then we technically move on to the next X-Men crossover. Now, with that being said, we're going to cover Wolverine issue number 117 to kind of kick off today's video. And of course, it does pick up the last chapter left off at when it came to Wolverine in the X-Men, because in issue number 116, you basically had our heroes being able to find this camp after being able to escape from Bastion's base. Now, once they did find this camp and run into a guy known as Mustang, they had learned that this camp was built by people who had different kinds of medical needs. The thing was, every single person at that camp was going to the same clinic to get their medical help. The problem was that facility, that clinic, was not really a clinic. It was a facility that was currently being used as a way to slowly turn those people into Prime Sentinels. Now, at the very end of that chapter, you had some Prime Sentinels being able to find the X-Men in that area. And so you had Mustang, one of the guys who was part of that camp, help the X-Men get into an underground tunnel. The problem was that he didn't get to tell every single person at that camp what was really happening to them. They weren't getting any kind of medical help. Instead, they were slowly turning into hunting robots to hunt down, of course, the X-Men and other mutants across the world. And so as we dive into 117, we literally pick up the idea of Mustang saying like, guys, listen, I'm telling you the truth. They're slowly turning us into hunting robots, and he takes those people over to where the X-Men were hiding at. The problem is that some of those people were already so far down the process, as soon as you have Bastion say, I need more Prime Sentinels out there to find the X-Men, some of those people, they had turned into what? Prime Sentinels, and began to attack the X-Men. Now, for the ones who have not gone completely over, they're freaking out because they have gone to that clinic. They have been slowly changed, been given different kinds of cybernetic body parts to begin their process. And so once you do have the X-Men being able to take down all those different Prime Sentinels, this kind of leads into a small debate, because you have some folks who are okay with the idea of turning into Prime Sentinels. And the reason why, because again, all of these different people have different kinds of medical needs. They're blind, their legs don't work anymore, or they might be just having MS. Who knows what's going on with them? But the idea of having a chance to see again, walk again, or use an arm or a leg or whatever, it's like, man, that would be so great. But it's Mustang saying, but is it worth the idea of losing your soul? And so that right there is kind of small debate between those people right there. But for the X-Men, they got to go. They have to go to that facility and basically shut it down, because it will continue to build more and more Prime Sentinels. Now, by this point in the story, Bastion is freaking out for two reasons. One, because you have S.H.I.E.L.D. right now be activated by Senator Kelly and also by Henry Gyrich to go after Bastion and also the different members of Operation Zero Tolerance, because it's Senator Kelly realizing now what he did was completely wrong. He basically compared Operation Zero Tolerance over to the Holocaust, and he hated the idea of innocent people who may be mutants or not being attacked by some hunting robots who may believe they could be mutants or not. But either way, you had the American government realize, okay, you know what? We're in the wrong. Go ahead, activate S.H.I.E.L.D. to go ahead and shut down Bastion and also Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, we also have to remember that there is a mutant known as Sabra who's came from Israel over to America with some vital information about Bastion and also the operation as well. And so he wants to find her and basically bring her down as well. Now, he also calls up the doctor who runs that supposed clinic that turns people into Prime Sentinels. He said, hey, listen, go all out. Like, go ahead and build as many as you can, because we need all hands on deck. And so for the doctor, he's okay with that idea. Now, the X-Men are not the only ones out there in the middle of the desert. We also have to remember about Jubilee, because when it came to Generation X, she was a prisoner of Bastion. before anybody else was when it came to the X-Men. Now, she also helped the X-Men escape from the Hulkbuster base that Bash is working out of. But recently in the Generation X comics, she was able to break away. And so right now, it's just her just wandering in the desert, hoping she'll find some kind of help. Which, lucky for her, she's going to get that help, because while you have the X-Men beginning to plan out their plan to attack the facility that's making the Prime Sentinels, you have Logan just leave. And the reason why, because with the wind blowing, he had picked up on the scent of Jubilee and realized she needs some help. Now, unfortunately for Jubilee, she does run into a Prime Sentinel. But luckily for Jubilee, she does get saved by Wolverine. Now, I kind of like this a lot, because when it came to Jubilee, when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, at first the X-Men had no idea that she was in their Australian base. But when it came to her and Logan, they were then able to build a tight bond with one another. And matter of fact, for a good portion of Wolverine comics, it was Wolverine and Jubilee, kind of like Batman and Robin. But the thing was, for Wolverine and Jubilee, they have built this tight bond where it's kind of like, for me personally, a father and daughter bond. But either way, it's nice to see the two characters being able to reunite with one another. Now, once you do have Wolverine and Jubilee being able to get back with the rest of the X-Men, by that point, the X-Men and also a few people from the trailer park were able to tear down the entire facility. Now, while you do have the X-Men walking around and trying their best to find any more information about Bastion, but also the idea of Operation Zero Tolerance, for Bastion, he begins to freak out. And the reason why, because he now knows that his other base has been, well, attacked. And so for him, he needs to release the one Prime Sentinel that has higher grade weapons and should be able to bring down the X-Men. The problem is that that one Prime Sentinel is no other than Mustang, the guy we saw earlier who had actually helped the X-Men when they had first arrived at that camp. Now, unfortunately, they must fight against him. And so as we dive into Wolverine issue number 118, we're really getting into the idea of us seeing Wolverine, Cyclops, and also Cannonball kind of wondering what to do here when it comes to, well, Mustang, because he's now a Prime Sentinel. And with him being a Prime Sentinel at the moment, that means most likely he's going to try to kill off our heroes. And matter of fact, he does try to do that. Now for Logan, he does try to reason with Mustang to hopefully help him regain control of his body. The problem is for Mustang, he can't do it. He is completely right now being controlled by Bastion. And so you have Logan say, Cannonball, Cyclops, go outside, I'll stay behind and try my best to reason with the guy to hopefully bring him back over to our side. But while you do have Cyclops and Cannonball continue to help out Storm and also Jean Grey get the rest of the people outside of the facility, you then have Storm realize that, hey, guys, here comes an army of Prime Sentinels at the moment, and most likely they might be coming after us. But I want to go ahead and shift back over to Wolverine trying his best to reason with Mustang, because at first, it's not really working. The control of Bastion is just too strong. What happens next, though, is that you have Jubilee appear, because for Jubilee, once she heard that Logan was left behind with a Prime Sentinel, she freaked out. She went back inside there. When she does use her powers on basically Mustang's eyes, it makes him realize that he can see again. Because remember, for Mustang, he was blind. And so with the idea of him now seeing, it helps him kind of fight against the control that Bastion has on him. And so it's slowly turning Mustang onto the side of good. But on the outside, we do see that technically that army of Sentinels are not trying to come after the X-Men. Instead, they're on the run, because what's happening right now, the American government said, okay, you know what? We were in the wrong. Go ahead, activate S.H.I.E.L.D. and have S.H.I.E.L.D. kick out Bastion, because even though he did have many countries backing when it came to the idea of targeting mutants, they all kind of realized what they're doing right now against the mutant race is completely wrong. And so you have S.H.I.E.L.D. right now just going after Bastion and also his Prime Sentinels all over the nation. Now, with that being said, one of them does detect Cyclops and wants to fight against Cyclops. Now, for Scott, he tries his best to reason with this one particular Prime Sentinel. The problem is that, one, his attack missed, and two, his plan does not work out at all. And so, unfortunately, Scott is hit, and we're kind of left to wonder, is Scott going to die? We already know he's not going to, but like, for the sake of the story, it's like, oh my God, Scott Summers might die. But this kind of leads into, for me personally, the ending for Operation Zero Tolerance on one side, because this is just the last issue for Wolverine in Operation Zero Tolerance. But we still have one more issue when it comes to the X-Men, when it comes to Operation Zero Tolerance. But anyways, though, when it comes to Cyclops, you didn't have the medic team for S.H.I.E.L.D. realize that there's something inside of him. Now, we do kind of skip over a few pages. You do have the X-Men being able to get a jet to go back home. You also have Mustang stay behind to hopefully find a way to get rid of his problem at the moment, being a Prime Sentinel. But while you have the X-Men on their way home, you have Scott kind of realize that, really the entire X-Men realized that when they were captured by Bastion earlier, they had implanted some kind of bomb in Scott Summers. And the question is right now, is Scott going to survive? The thing is, we now have to shift back over to the main X-Men book. And so now we have to dive into X-Men issue number 69. Now, this is the final chapter for Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, when it came to X-Men chapters, they really did focus more on Iceman, Marrow, and also, a character known as Dr. Reyes. Now, there were really only one chapter for Uncanny X-Men because the Uncanny X-Men team were currently out in space at the moment. But anyways, for this X-Men team, they were basically surrounded by an army of Prime Sentinels at the end of the last chapter. But as we dive into the opening pages of this chapter, we're seeing our heroes right now about to meet up with a character known as Sabra. And so we're kind of left to wonder, like, how in the world did our heroes escape that last situation? Well, we do get a flashback here. And with this flashback, we basically learn like how our heroes were able to escape. It was all because of Sabra. Now, we had talked about her character in our last two videos. When it comes to Sabra, she's from Israel, and she's part of the Israeli Secret Service. And the thing is, her Secret Service had been gathering information about Bastion to basically use against him. And so when the time came to use that info against him, she had downloaded the information and traveled all the way over to, America to meet up with the X-Men. And so when it came to the X-Men, Iceman, Dr. Reyes, and also Marrow being completely surrounded by all these Prime Sentinels, she was then able to meet up with them, but basically help them out to get out of that situation. But now we have to switch over to Senator Kelly and also, Henry Gyrich. Now, for these two characters, they have been trying their best to get Operation Zero Tolerance shut down. Like, their main goal is to make sure that Bastion cannot win here. And technically, he won't. But here's the thing, because for those two characters, they went over to the government and got their approval to shut down the operation, but it also used S.H.I.E.L.D. to go after Bastion. Now, for Senator Kelly, for a good while there, he kind of felt like the mutant race should be contained. The mutant race should be handled in some type of way. But then it's kind of like, he realized what a huge mistake he made when it came to him trying to allow Bastion to kill off the mutant race. But either way, it's now S.H.I.E.L.D. going after, Bastion. But getting back over to our heroes, you do have our heroes arrive to this home. Now, this home is where Detective Jones' son was being held at, as we saw at the end of the last chapter, but we also saw some older woman holding on to him as well. Well, we learned that technically this is Bastion's mother. Now, here's the thing, because once he had learned that Sabra was on her way over to America, he was kind of like, nope, we got to stop that right now because she's going after my mother. Now, here's the thing. If you believe that in this chapter right here, we were going to sit down and actually talk about the origin of Bastion, you are wrong, because in this issue, it's not given to us. There's only hints about the idea of his origin. And the thing is, his origins told to us in a Machine Man Bastion Annual 98 issue that we may cover because it does give us the actual origin of Bastion here. Just know that Bastion had technically been around for a good while because of a combination of two other characters from a previous storyline. But either way, when the heroes arrive at that home, they do find Bastion. They do find Detective Jones' missing son. They do find Bastion's mother, but this leads into Iceman fighting against Bastion. Now, for Bastion, it's him once again trying to explain like why he did all of this for, and trying to say like it was his mother's teaching, even though apparently she's saying that he took her teachings in a different direction. But either way, for Iceman, he's kind of like, look at you. Like, you truly believed that an entire nation would turn their back on the idea of another race out there being killed off, similar to the Holocaust. And it's also Iceman saying, like, I've been waiting for this for a long time. Now, for me personally, this crossover is not the best. Like, out of all the 90s crossovers, it might be one of the lowest ones. But at the same time, it does pay off the Iceman storyline that kind of picked up prior to the crossover. Because when it came to Bobby Drake, he went undercover to hopefully bring down Graydon Creed. But his father got severely injured because, well, his father did talk back to Creed. But anyways, for Bobby, he had to watch his father relearn how to walk again, how to do different things again. And so for Bobby, he hated the idea that there were people out there who hated him so much they went after his family members who were technically human. But either way, is Bobby right now getting his lick back by beating down on Bastion and saying like, you believe that you're doing the right thing, but right now you're an evil person. And look at your Prime Sentinels. These were innocent people who may or may not have any idea that they were being basically taken over by you for some kind of war against the mutant race. And the thing is, Bobby is right, because if you think back to the last few chapters we covered for Wolverine, you had that camp of random people who were believing that, hey, you know what? There's a clinic nearby. They're going to make me better. But in reality, they weren't. They were going to that clinic and slowly being turned into Prime Sentinels. Now, while you have Bobby fighting against Bastion, the battle is stopped, thankfully, by S.H.I.E.L.D. arriving to take Bastion away because the American government said no more. You are no longer allowed to do anything at all on the American soil. And the thing is, that's the end. Like, literally, that's the end of this whole crossover. And then we kind of go into the post idea of Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, I think, if I'm correct, we're going to have to work our way up to the hunt for Charles Xavier next when it comes to our next crossover that we have to officially talk about. But anyways, guys, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.